Hi everyone, you're very welcome to session 3 of our webinar series, Master Your Inner Game. I'm quite excited about this evening's workshop. It's the area of pressure and performing under pressure. And I think I've been quite fortunate to have, I suppose, a laboratory of experience from different backgrounds. When I was thinking about this workshop this evening, I was thinking back to a memory of coming down by Quinn's pub back in 2005 on the Galway bus and seeing this mass of people left and right of the bus from Cork and Galway. And just as you turn the bend at Quinn's pub in Drumcondra and you're heading up towards Crow Park, it's just an amazing experience. But at 21, it definitely caused a bit of shock and surprise to me heading into the All Ireland final, how much it meant to people, I suppose, and the interest in people and just the whole occasion of it. And I can remember the match being, it took quite a while to maybe settle into it. And, even things like coming out the tunnel on Ireland final day and you get this wave of noise coming at you. And it's just like going into a vacuum, like of wind and noise and all coming at you as you come out the tunnel and this wave of energy coming towards you. And I think I was down near the canal end before I knew it, after running about 100 yards and not knowing where I was in my head in a spin. And just for the first 3 or 4 minutes of the warm up, you probably weren't even aware where your feet touching the ground. You couldn't feel the ball. Just a nervousness and excitement, a strange kind of numbness as well in your body and mind at different times. So, um, pressure is a funny thing, and we know it's there. Everyone has it at some point in the day or the week or the month. It's hard to put your finger on it or name or label it at different times how it feels, but it definitely does impact people and how they perform, and it definitely has an impact on what we're maybe capable of from what we're delivering on currently at different times, be it in a job role or a relationship role or a sports role or whatever domain we're in. So tonight, I suppose I'm really going to love to share with you that, in over a decade playing elite sport, there was definitely things that helped me with dealing with pressure and coping with pressure. The week leading up to All Ireland finals, the morning of All Ireland finals, and actually in the All Ireland final, dealing with, expectation, scrutiny, consequences of winning or losing. And then when I think of my 10 years maybe in the business world, in the corporate world as an accountant, doing professional exams, a lot of pressure to get them because, it moved you on the ladder, it moved you to a higher level of income, it moved you into a different position, maybe in work, and you're viewed on differently maybe by your peers in the job as well. So, there was expectations, there was scrutiny and consequence around that as well. And then over the last, 6 years, I've been very lucky to maybe retrain and go into the area of performance psychology coaching and, work with elite athletes in professional sport and semi-amateur sport and elite amateur sport, and also with business leaders and CEOs and managers on, dealing with the pressure of managing a high performing team or a high performing organization, having to communicate to staff and clients and customers around different things. There's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of scrutiny around those jobs as well, and a lot of consequences. So I think tonight will be a sharing of kind of rich experience around that and what's worked and not worked, and what people have found beneficial and not beneficial. And hopefully you've another stack of tools maybe to bring away with you to use in your own lives, both from a personal and professional point of view, that'll help you to, I suppose, optimize your performance in those pressure moments. So I'm just going to pull up a few slides here so we can share with you. So performing under pressure. Just reading this sentence to you here now, just to, I suppose, share a little insight before we start. So Dr. Albert Ellis is I suppose, an expert in psychology and the human mind around cognitive behavioral therapy. So just understanding how we think, what we think about, and the healthy thinking patterns we may have and the unhealthy thinking patterns we have. And he states that it's not the situations you face that cause unhelpful emotions, it's the way you think about those situations. So traffic isn't the cause of our anger or irritation, it's how we think about traffic. Um, the boss been a bit irritable on a Monday morning. It isn't really about the boss causing that angry or frustration emotion that occurs in us. It's our interpretation of the angry boss. Um, so it's really, going back to a small bit around Viktor Frankl, we have that ability to choose our response to situations. So between the stimulus and response, there is a gap. And when I choose to, take a helicopter view, maybe stand back and say, I'm not in this experience, I'm standing back from the experience and I'm going, okay, this is happening here. How do I want to interpret it? And what kind of meaning do I want to attach to it? And when we step back from the experience and we are not the experience and we become the observer and watcher, it can help to, change our emotional response to pressure situations. So that's kind of going to be a good foundation for our workshop today and maybe understanding our experience with pressure and how we handle pressure. So just what we've covered so far, just to kind of rehash your memory on things. So first workshop, we looked around the key principles of growth and fixed mindset and how we maybe develop things around harnessing our ability to grow our intelligence, improve our ability in certain situations, improve our skills, looking at a more process orientated mindset than an outcome orientated mindset, realizing with practice of quality of effort and quality of intentions, we can improve any skill or any ability we have. Also looking at the importance of embracing challenges, embracing failure as part of the success continuum, seeking out feedback from, people we trust, people whose opinion we value to, shine a lens on areas we're strong on and areas we can improve on. And also, realizing that there's an element of risk and an element of uncomfortableness around, striving to improve or striving to progress. We also looked at maybe 3 lessons I'd learned from high performance individuals, be it in sport or business, and realizing that failure is part of this continuum of improvement and achievement. And, it doesn't define us. It's about separating ourselves from the situation, what went well, what we can improve on. Also looking at that ability to choose our response to situations when we have a setback, and how we explain that to ourselves is really important to, continue to motivate ourselves to have confidence and clarity going forward, and how we explain that has a big impact on it. And the third part is that, when we have a setback in our career or our relationships or our sport or whatever it is, that that shouldn't define us. And it's about separating who we are from what we do. So you have a number of roles in life where people see a value in you and what you do and what you represent. So that could be your parenting, your teaching skills, your coaching skills, your volunteering skills, your skills as a brother or sister, your mother or father, or a parent, or a son, or a sister or daughter. And, if one of these things has a situation that doesn't work out today in the moment, there's 9 or 10 other components to our personality in our day where we can have some sort of achievement and success in it. And it's having those multiple identities is a really important thing to help us generate confidence in our skill set. And we can transfer those skills from those different domains in a lot of different contexts, in my experience. We also looked at beliefs and, empowering beliefs and self-limiting beliefs, and the importance of our beliefs and how they drive our values, our thinking, our mindset, our emotions, and ultimately then our results and our outcomes. We looked at the importance of guiding principles and how they drive our mindset, our choices, our expectations, and our behaviors. And last week we looked at purpose and using purpose of a fuel to drive our energy, providing more meaning and context to our work, and really differentiating great teams and great organizations, and, moving above this outcome or performance basis and looking at what's the higher purpose of doing things, be it around our health, our job, our relationships, and what's the point of anything that we do, and asking those higher order questions. Then we looked at character training and how we, focus the lens on our character strengths has a huge impact when we use 3 out of 5 of these character strengths in our personal and professional lives, we have more meaning and purpose in our work. Also, when we recognize the strengths and character strengths in other people, we have better relationships and better working relationships, makes us feel connected and closer to people. When we're able to focus on our character strengths, we have more positive emotions because we work on our negativity bias and squeezing that out. And from a health and well-being, having a more positive emotion, a more strengths focus means we're more susceptible to feeling more positive emotions, and obviously our health and well-being curve goes up as well. And also we looked at, values and principles and the importance of who I am and what I stand for. When we have successes or failures, that will be a constant. And can I focus on that and what I'm good at, what my strengths are, but also what I stand for as a person. And we looked at inspirational leaders, and they are authentic. And what does authentic mean? In essence, it means to be who you are. So when I know who I am and what I stand for, I can be an authentic leader, and I can lead from a place of values and principles. And that generates great confidence, clarity, and conviction in what I do. And the last piece we looked at around was vision and goal setting. And putting a blank canvas on the next 12 months, if I was to use my imagination to look at the possibilities and outcomes I could have in my health, in my career, in my personal and professional life, in my relationships, what would I go after? If I let go of fear and I went after the things I really want to go after, what would I write down and what would I target and go after? So that was the vision and goal setting side of it. So looking at tonight then, and the outline for tonight's workshop, we're going to look at in section 1 our relationship with pressure and understand how we respond to it. Number 2, we're going to look at in section 2 how we retrain our habitual response to pressure. And number 3, we're going to look at the tools to perform during and after performance. So Richie McCaw, I suppose, is going to start off our section 1. And when we think of Richie McCaw, on the success and achievement side of it, on one side of the coin, we would look at a guy who captained the All Blacks to double all a World Cup winning side. As captain, I think he had over 148 tests with New Zealand with a win rate of 90%. He also was World Player of the Year 3 times. On the other side of the coin, before the 2011 World Cup, Richie McCaw had a lot of self-doubt around his leadership style. He was deemed a choker and a poor captain by some of his teammates. A lot of the public in New Zealand had lost confidence in him, and he had lost confidence in himself. And he felt that under pressure, he had failed to lead the team in the way he wanted. He felt he got quite passive in his leadership style, and tried to do everything himself and tried to solve all the problems himself and didn't involve his team and teammates. And he was really trying to, avoid failing rather than approaching success. And they're two very different continuums. A person who's approaching success is realizing that this is a learning moment. They're operating from a place of love and excitement towards the situation. They're also realizing that failure isn't fatal, and they're using a growth mindset. A person who's going out to avoid failure is maybe not taking risks, maybe worrying about how they look or be perceived, and they're avoiding key challenges and they're avoiding feedback from others. So Richie's been a great exponent of that, and when he started to change his thinking around this, he realized that you can't have high performance without pressure. They go hand in hand. Most people spend their whole lives trying to avoid it, but to be at your best, you have to learn to embrace it. So he took that thinking pattern, reshaped it in 2010, 2011, and he went on to have that other side of the coin around that success that I talked about. So why do we feel pressure? On the left-hand side of my grid here at the moment, we're just going to look at our brain for a moment. And we're going to look at the limbic system, which is the red system or the hot system. And this is our emotional thinking brain, which houses our emotions and our behaviors. And within that, we have a thing called our threat detector system, which is the old part of our brain. And when we're a hunter or gatherers, this was really, really important because it protects us and keeps us safe. And anytime we do something that maybe is unfamiliar or uncomfortable or uncertain, our threat detector spikes up and it starts to protect us from a physical threat in the environment, and we start to anticipate danger. But that internal threat could be a thing where we're worried about the expectations that someone has of us, maybe how we're going to be perceived if we're not successful. And that threat can be emotional as well. And that limbic threat to red hot system is lit up as well. And sometimes that emotion starts to protect us from the things that we want to achieve, like success, like maybe presenting in front of people, maybe like performing in a sports domain. And then on the other side of that, we have a thing called the blue system and the prefrontal cortex. So we all have this front part of the brain, which is logical, rational, sees all angles perspective. Now, this part of the brain also has abilities such as overanalyzing and overthinking. And the more than the red system, which provides us with the abilities of emotional regulation, it also, after stressful periods, brings us back to homeostasis and allows us to regulate again and feel calm and arrested. It also gives us that drive and passion and motivation to maybe push through difficult moments, push through tackles on the sports field, and also get out of bed and do the things we need to do to achieve success. So it's about having a balance between these two systems and realizing when I go into an unfamiliar setting that my threat detector is going to come up and it's going to start anticipating danger and maybe firing off some emotional responses or some physical responses in my body. And, you know, it may feel like my ego has been threatened here, my reputation, my self-esteem are all vulnerable to it. So we just have to recognize maybe this will happen when we step outside that comfort zone, and our brain will start to react in unusual ways sometimes. So what do I know about the zone of performance? It is definitely uncomfortable. And when we leave this bubble and maybe we're presenting to our team or we're presenting to a new group or we're going into a new challenge like a semi-final or a final of an All-Ireland final, our fear zone maybe starts to spike up, and that ego mind starts to spike up, and it wants to keep us safe, it wants the familiar, it doesn't want to do things uncertain. And it might find, you know, a lack of confidence in us. It might start to trigger some self-doubt about, am I ready for this? Am I comfortable doing this? Have I enough prepared for this? It might start to find excuses and want to check out and say, no, I'm not ready for this, make up an injury or an illness or send them an email saying I can't do it. And I might start to dream up scenarios where people will be critical of me, start giving out to me, and maybe won't believe I'm any good at this. And that's our ego mind wanting to protect us and keep us safe. And then maybe we seek out some support around this and we talk to a coach or a family member or a friend. Or maybe we just say, okay, I want to change my career like I did when I was 29. And I spoke to a coach around some of the challenges I was having around, you know, leaving a career that was stable and secure after 10 years and after working my ass off for 7 years to get that qualification and move up the career ladder on it. My own parents, maybe what would their reaction be to me leaving a career after 10 years and not knowing what I wanted to do? You know, financially, what might be the implications of having no job and no secure income? And what other implications might there be? So all these were things and problems and maybe issues that were there that I had to, you know, chat around with an expert or chat around myself and just kind of get an understanding of it. And was from there was taking small steps maybe to chat to someone around different courses that were out there, looking at a career coach and saying, what are my passions and interests and where would they be suited to next? Looking at some of the skills I acquired from the financial world, from the sports world that I could use maybe in my next career, and looking at that kind of ikigai and that purpose model around what I love doing, what I'm passionate about, and trying to find some areas that I was interested in. So sports psychology was an area that kind of flickered my attention throughout my career. And I said I want to learn a bit more about that. And I used to take a little trip up to Dublin every Wednesday night to do a certificate in sports psychology for 20 weeks for 2 hours. And I knew after 4 or 5 classes that this was the path for me and I was really loving it. And once I had that done, I looked at doing a master's, and 6 years later I'm coaching that space with a business and a thing I really enjoy. So sometimes, stepping into that fear is a great thing. We realize that we're moving through this cycle, dealing with some of the issues that will inevitably come up when we go into new ground and new territory. Realizing that you acquire new skills by upskilling, doing a course, by putting yourself in new challenging situations. And suddenly that comfort zone starts to shrink, in my opinion, and that learning and growth zone starts to morph over it. And then you're really moving into, that purpose model, living the things that you want to do and dream about doing, and you set really ambitious and challenging goals for yourself and you conquer objectives. So, realizing that there will be uncomfortable moments, and if I can start to move through these cycles very quickly, I'll conquer that fear and fear evaporate. So the number one thing I need to do is start maybe exposing myself to small bouts of fear and uncomfortableness. And when I do that, it starts to evaporate and it doesn't have the same hold on me. So perception of stress is a really important topic I want to talk about you next. And, there was a great study in Stanford University where they looked at 180,000 people in America. And they asked them all what their perception of stress was and how much stress they've had over the last 12 months. And the first question around their perception of stress was, do you believe that stress is damaging to your health? And 40% of them believed it was. And now that 40%, they tracked them through their lifetime and they found that they had a much shorter life expectancies than the people that didn't believe or didn't think that stress was harmful to their health. So from a longevity point of view, I think they lived about 30% longer. And then they also looked at another study where they trained people up on the stress response versus the relaxation response. And we all have emotional, mental, and physical responses to stress and pressure, where we notice it in different ways in our bodies, like the fight or flight response, where our pupils dilate. Maybe we feel a shortness of breath, a heating up of the physical body. Maybe mentally we find ourselves maybe a bit disorientated. Emotionally we feel a bit excited, nervous, fearful, whatever it is. And they taught students how to look at this and say, this is facilitative to performance. My body, my mind, my emotions are getting ready to perform. And they found the people that use this as facilitative started to have physical changes in their body. They had the same blood pressure, but when we're deeming this stress as stressful rather than challenging, they found that their pupils started to narrow and the blood vessels started to narrow in our bodies. But when we viewed it as challenging and helping us to perform, these pupils started to regulate and widen. So there was physical and mental changes, and people started to move into a challenge state where they produce more oxygen, which allowed them to feel more alert mentally and physically. They started to feel challenged in their mind, excited in their mind. They started to produce more glucose as a result, so their decision making and their processing speed was quicker. And then people who reached out and said, I'm feeling excited, I'm feeling concerned, I'm feeling worried, in the second part of the study, and shared it with other people, started to produce another hormone we produce during stress is oxytocin. And this makes us feel more connected to other people and wanting to communicate and relate with others. We start to feel more love and joy when we're in this oxytocin state. We start to feel more compassion for others. And it's also a wonderful thing where we strengthen our heart muscles and we strengthen our immune system. And oxytocin is a layer around our heart that helps us to do that. So connecting with others when we're feeling stress or some sort of fear, anxiety, or overwhelm can help us to produce oxytocin, which strengthens our immune system and strengthens our heart. So there are two really important things around our perception of stress to remember and be conscious of. When I start to feel pressure symptoms, whatever they are for people at different times, is to say, my body is starting to get ready to perform here. It's starting to pump more oxygen in where I feel physically alert and ready. It's starting to produce glucose in my brain, which will have quicker decision making. And I start to feel my heart more, which allows me to connect with others, communicate with others, relate to others, and feel more passion and joy in the moment, and also strengthen my immune system and that core around my heart. So our perception of stress is a massive, massive part of that. Now we look at a thing I call the alert and calm response. And this is very much similar to our stress and relaxation response. So if we could reframe this word stress, when we think of stress and I say the word bomb, maybe, we've very negative connotations around a bomb where we say maybe see people dying, we see death, we see terror, we see panic, we see anxiety. And stress maybe has some of those alarm bells for ourselves where consciously and subconsciously it activates things in us and it activates that stress response. For me, it's about, reframing that and using that perception and saying, okay, that's my alert response now. I'm ready, getting ready to perform. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm probably in my calm response. When I'm getting ready to go to bed, I'm in my calm response. When I'm walking in nature, maybe I'm in my calm response. When I'm meditating, I'm in my calm response. So trying to change the language maybe might be a help around facilitating that performance response we want. Elite performers are always talking around activation. So we need a certain level of physical and mental activation to reach the level of performance we want. So when we wake up in the morning, we're probably at 1 on this curve of alertness. So we're sleepy, drowsy, physically we're not awake, mentally we're not tuned in. And we need to get up and get moving and eat and plan for the day ahead and get excited maybe around the tasks and goals that we have. Then we start to move up to this curve and maybe we're moving to a 3 or 4 and we arrive into work maybe and we've an important meeting and we start to move into that optimum stress level. Same with a performer in sport. We have to go through a warm-up routine, both from a physical and mental point of view, a technical and tactical point of view, to move ourselves from maybe that 1 to 4 sequence and into that 5 to 8 sequence. And, realizing that that's a nice space to be in. We're more alert, more focused, and able to get the best out of ourselves. And then we maybe have a point where we get too stressed and we're overloaded with too many priorities, too many tasks. Our short-term memory becomes overwhelmed, our PFC becomes overwhelmed, and we feel exhausted by the thought of doing something or the doing of the task. And then the last piece, then we've got to think about moving into that 9 to a 10, where maybe we move into anxiety, panic, anger, and breakdown. And that's where our stress response, our alert response has gone way too high, and we need to recognize the symptoms and signs when this happens. So I want you to just think of this for a moment and say, okay, between 1 and 4, what are the activities or the situations that I'm in where I'm feeling too little stress, I'm slightly underloaded, and maybe I'm in that recovery zone, I'm relaxed, I'm content, I'm peaceful, and I'm just in that recovery mode, and that's absolutely important every single day. And that can be having your lunch, it can be going for a walk, it can be when you wake up in the morning, it can be when you're reading a book. And then what are the situations during the day or the tasks during the day or the things, the activities that drive you to somewhere between that 5 to 8. And I'd love you to think of, when you're at your best, you're most focused, absorbed in that flow state, no concern for the past, no concern for the future. What's your best number to be at in that 5 to 8 window? So for me, when I was playing sport, it was somewhere between a 7 and an 8, where I wasn't trying too hard, I wasn't overcompensating, I wasn't overwhelmed, I wasn't too tense. I was just in that lovely place where it felt effortless. I didn't have to overthink or overanalyze. I was in a state of maybe no mind. I was in a positive mind and I was just doing things on autopilot. And then just identifying maybe some of the activities for yourself and the situations that drive you into that overload, and maybe some activities or situations that maybe drive you into anxiety, panic, anger, or breakdown and over the last 12 months. So just have a look at that and maybe list some key things for you around the last couple of months. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to populate any of those boxes there for now. So the activities and situations you like doing in that kind of 1 to 4 box. The activities or situations that challenge you maybe in a healthy way between 5 and 8. The situations or activities that maybe over challenge you in that 8 to 9 box, and the situations or activities that have overwhelmed you in that 9 to 10 box. And we're just bringing awareness maybe to things that trigger you, or situations or activities that trigger this alert and calm response for you. So activation is an important part. We need it every day to get the best out of ourselves. Our career can be a great vehicle to get a healthy level of challenge. And once we support from colleagues, support from our team, it can be a really rewarding and rich experience. Same in a sports environment. We need to get to a level of activation to get the best out of ourselves. And when we're too deactivated, we can be complacent and lack focus. And when we're overactivated, we can be too tensed, too wound up, and we don't express ourselves in the best way. So it's trying to find that right balance somewhere between 5 to 8, in my experience, would be the required activation or intensity level from working with top athletes, top performers in sport and business and in life. So just raising our awareness, then looking at when we're more self-aware around our own responses, we can create more choices around it. So I want you to think of maybe one thing that you populated that optimum level of activation for yourself. And I want you to think of that experience when you're at your best. What were you thinking maybe before, during, and after it? What were you feeling during that experience? If you were to observe yourself from, a distance, what words would you describe how you're behaving? What images were in your mind before and during your performance? What was motivating you during that great performance? And what was your attention mostly on while you were performing in that moment? Thinking that optimal level of activation where you had your best performance in, a personal or professional context, or a sport or a hobby context. Just taking 3 or 4 minutes on each of those buckets and starting to recognize your best performance with your optimum number of, activation and intensity. We're just bringing awareness to some of the patterns we have, some of the responses we have. And when you have that complete, then it's maybe looking at another situation where you underperformed. And what maybe caused that? What was I thinking here before it and during it? What was I feeling before and during it? What words, if I was observing myself from the stand or observing myself from, a helicopter, what would I see in the behaviors? How would I describe them? And during and before and after that performance, what were the images in my mind? What was motivating me during that period? Where was most of my attention going? So me at my best in the performance situation, and maybe me at my worst in the performance situation. And we're just trying to recognize some patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. And when I'm thinking from a positive and helpful point of view, generally that starts to feel and generate positive images, positive feelings in my mind and body. My behaviors then start to replicate that. My motivation maybe is to do well and perform, seek out the challenges, seek out the opportunities, looking for solutions. And my attention is probably on that task and that moment and approaching success. I'll just give you another 60 seconds there, maybe to jot down a few more answers or insights around those questions. Okay, the next piece I want to look at is recognizing our mindset on a daily basis. So for me, we have our maybe A game, our B game, and our C game. And I want you to think maybe of a traffic light system. So for me, I definitely find my A game is probably mostly in the morning time. And, I probably spend a good part of my day in the morning getting ready for the day ahead. As regards, I start with a morning routine of exercise and movement. I spend 10 or 15 minutes meditating, and I also make sure the healthy, nutritious breakfast. And, I spend maybe 15 minutes going for a walk and fresh air before I start at 9 o'clock. And I find this helps get me into, a mindset where I can flourish. And I probably spend 10 to 15% of my time where everything feels good, particularly in that morning sequence, and I'm able to focus on my key priorities and tasks. This is where maybe you're giving yourself an 80 to 100% mark, where I'm in that kind of A plus category. And it's just looking at maybe some of the routines and habits that I have that enable me to get here. So I know when I start my day in that kind of ritual, where I have a good night's sleep and I prepare the night before around that, maybe going to bed at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and that feeds into me being in that A mindset. And I definitely think that A mindset is probably the morning for me and my best part of the day. Other parts of the day, then I might slip into that B mindset, and I know in the afternoon, definitely my energy feels somewhere between a 6 and an 8 out of 10. My challenge here is to stay on task, stay on priorities, and stay in the moment. I feel okay, but I'm not at, that flourishing energy where I'm at an 8 or 9 out of 10. And what do I need here? I probably recognize that by 2 o'clock, it's probably a good time for me to take an hour off. So I often go for, a light lunch and I go for a walk at this time, collect Callum from school and things like that, and getting fresh air is a real good help for me around this. And it's probably 3:30 before I get back into doing more work tasks and looking at the evening ahead and my priorities around that. So recognizing that's probably a window for me where I have to stay in the moment, stay on task, and make sure I'm executing what I need to do in those 2 or 3 hours after lunch. And the C zone for me is probably, thankfully, it doesn't happen too many days, but this is where, you're probably somewhere in between a 1 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10. And I'm feeling awful, and I do not want to be in the workspace or a competitive space in a sports setting. And my mindset really is just to get through the day. And what do I need here? It's maybe recognizing my own case, maybe when I'm overworking, that it's maybe time to pull back, turn off the laptop, turn off the phone, get some rest, get some healthy food in, and just switch off and maybe go for a walk and take things really, really easily. Um, and it's recognizing when those warning lights are coming up and maybe I'm overworking or overdoing it, that I'm in this C zone, and I know what I need. Then it's that patience and bit of self-love and self-care. If you were to take this to a sports context, as a hurler, for a 70-minute game, for me, the A zone, you might be lucky enough to, a quarter of the game where you're in this flourishing mindset and the game feels an ease, and it feels like it's just every ball is coming towards you and you're not nearly effortless in your actions. For most of the game, then maybe another 45 minutes, you're in, an okay zone where you're competing, you're in a competitive mindset and you're staying in that moment. And it's just working really hard to try and dominate your man and try and dominate the moment, and not worrying about the past and the future, and working really hard mentally at that. And then there might be a 10 or 15-minute period in the game where, your opponent is really strong. You're after leaking a score or two, you're after making a mistake or two. And what do I need in that moment? Maybe support from a teammate, positive encouragement towards myself, readjusting my body language and realizing that the next ball can be a better ball and I can influence the next play. And realizing I may have somewhere in the region of 40 or 50 contests in the game. And one contest isn't going to make all the difference. I have 49 others that I need to focus in on, and the next one is the most important. Can't do anything about the last, and I can't do anything about the 1 5 layers down the tracks. So what can I do in the moment is the most important question I can ask myself here, and leaning on teammates to communicate for help around that. So that's just an important framework, I think, to think of throughout the day, where you're at and what your needs are. And if you're in the A zone, what enables me to get here? So for me, it's those healthy habits, those healthy thinking patterns, healthy food, healthy sleep the night before, having a clear plan of the day and sticking to that plan, and taking regular breaks, maybe every 90 minutes for 15 or 20 minutes, and longer breaks in the afternoon to replenish my energy stores. And when I'm in the C zone, then what do I need? It's not to be hard on myself, not putting major projects on my table, not expecting myself to deliver massive outcomes, and giving myself plenty of time to rest and recover. So that's the A, B, and C mindset. And I think it's a good little traffic light system to check your awareness throughout the day. So that's kind of section one. If you have any questions, pop them into the chat box there, and I'll either answer them now or I'll answer them later on, whatever suits best. But if there's any kind of questions from section one, I'd love to hear maybe some inputs. Anything people would like to know a bit more on, or anything they found beneficial or insightful around it? Okay, I'll take it we're all okay. So I'm going to move on to section two next, and it's a really good section, I think, just to understand some of our habitual responses to pressure and how we're going to, I suppose, retrain our habitual response to pressure and some of those mental and emotional and behavioral responses we have. So I probably introduced you to the concept last time around the blue and the red headed from the All Blacks, and I know it's something they've really trained over the last 10 years to become one of the top sides in the world. And emotion is a healthy thing, and energy are a healthy thing. From our first workshop, we looked at the performance zone, the recovery zone, and high energy and high emotion, how they can be helpful here. But also we know that emotion like anger and hostility and tension and anxiety can be emotions that are unhelpful, and energy that can be unhelpful. So it's about recognizing, we do have that blue system where we're in the moment, we're calm and clear, we're accurate on task, and we're loose and expressive. And it's trying to work that blue system, that logical, rational brain, to be in that moment. And we're going to look at some of the tools around that. And the second thing then is to look at maybe that red system or that red head, and when do we get triggered, and when do we go from, you know, that loose and expressive to maybe tight and inhibited and over trying and overextending ourselves. We become maybe desperate in our actions and our thinking. We always kind of look at the results and the outcomes and the wins or the losses rather than focusing on the process. We can become maybe anxious and aggressive and passive maybe in some scenarios towards that pressure, and we maybe try to over problem solve, or we forget the plan and we try to come out of the plan and the structure. So there are some of the tendencies you'd see between, you know, being in the red head and the blue head, and we've probably all experienced places where we've been calm and clear and confident and executing really well, and then maybe other situations or activities where we've gone into that red head and we've probably over tried and over committed, and we've focused on losing maybe rather than the process of achieving. So what happens maybe in these habitual responses, if we were to pull the bonnet on it a bit more? And for me, there's probably two types of behaviors. There's the ape behavior and there's the act behavior. So under pressure, you know, there was times where I became aggressive, passive, and escapism. How would I maybe recognize this in a sports capacity? Maybe when we started to maybe lose by 4 or 5 points in an important game, I'd start to become aggressive towards teammates. I start to become aggressive towards opposition and the referee, and my mind would be focused in on the wrong things and my attention are on the wrong things. At different times in my relationships now, I can find I can be defensive, which kind of comes up in a different form of aggressive, where I try to defend my position, defend my beliefs, and maybe try to control things a bit much. And, you know, that isn't really helpful in a relationship when you're trying to reach common ground. At times, you know, when I was younger and I was self-conscious and underconfident going into big moments, sometimes I become passive and I wouldn't, you know, take the lead on things. I wouldn't communicate in team meetings. In matches, I wouldn't seek out the ball or seek out challenging situations, and I'd play with a low risk. So that was a form of passiveness and escapism that I had in the hurling field at different times, when my ape brain or the monkey mind had taken over and I was working off that stress response. And what actually happens us there maybe is we go into a place where the expectations of others, the scrutiny of others, and the consequences of losing have overtaken us, and we're getting into that stress response where cortisol takes over, and I become emotionally flooded, mentally flooded, and my behaviors are, you know, either aggressive, passive, or I escape from the situation and flee the situation. And that's our fight or flight response. When I'm working from a place of impact, I'm working on a place from my act behaviors, and rather being in fight or flight mode, I'm in a place where, you know, I face and find solutions. So how do I face and find solutions? I become aware. I become aware of the situation and how I'm thinking, and I accept that I'm feeling these things, and I start to interpret them in a different way, that this is my body and mind preparing to perform. I become clear in my eyes and my mind of what I want to do and the tasks in front of me. And I really simplify it and I go back, what's my intention right now? In sport is to win the next play. In business is to complete the next task or complete the next sentence or communicate with a team member. I forget about the past and I come present to this moment and this moment and this time. When I lock into this moment, that takes me from the freedom of a past learned memory or past emotion, and I'm able to go into that priority mode and that key priority right here, right now, both in my personal and professional life. And then that allows me to impact the moment, impact the situation, come into the present, and here I can influence high performance and influence the situation that I'm in. So we just have to become aware of when we're in that escape mode or when we're in that impact mode, and what leads us to both of these things. So if we're to look at it for the moment and look at it from the ape tendencies or that chimp mind that we all have, what are some of the APE tendencies I've shown up with in the past when under pressure? And some people might just have one dominant tendency, they may have two dominant tendencies, or they may have a flavor of all three. So just looking at a previous situation where you're under the pump or under pressure, what were your tendencies? Was it aggressive, passive, or did you try to flee or escape the situation? What were some of the signs and symptoms you noticed in yourself around yourself under pressure? How did you think? How did you feel? How did you behave? What were some of the images that your mind was generating? And what was motivating you in this moment? So I'll give you a couple of minutes to maybe recognize some of the ape tendencies that we all had under pressure. And when this situation comes up again, you're maybe able to spot what direction you're going on the motorway and take the next junction and head for impact. The more awareness we can bring to these things, the more ability we have to step into the present moment, let go of a learned memory or learned emotion. And when we shine a light on it, we start to dilute the power of it and we start to step into our power and into the present moment, where we have choice and the ability to choose our response right now. And realizing that that's our old brain trying to root us to a memory of the past, an emotion of the past, and we let go of that and we step into our new brain, the impact brain, the person that wants to face up to our fear and find a solution and find the possibility, wants to just deal with this moment and the present moment and the challenge that's in front of me here now. I'll just give you another 30 seconds to jot down a few insights and ideas around the APE tendencies. So we'll be able to recognize when that ape is tapping us on the shoulder under pressure the next time. So I'll be coming to that next, Connor. So particular techniques so we can work to retrain responses to stressful situations, ones that can be used in the short term and others to retrain the long term. Yeah, I'll be coming to that. So we won't jump ahead on the slides yet. It's just growing our awareness when we come to this point. So training our responses. So you think of the helicopter view, and we're going to look at two sides of the coin again. So when I can come out of the streets of, I suppose, Manhattan or Dublin or whatever it is, and I'm able to look over the whole perspective of the whole stadium or the whole city, I'm able to look at it from a wide and slow view. So stepping back to allow ourselves to overcome. We're able to see when we step back and we take a higher view, we're able to see the possibilities and solutions. And when we have some other possibilities and some other choices, we're able to design a process then maybe of what's the option here, A, B, or C. We're more flexible in our thinking, we're more flexible in our movement, and we're more flexible in our emotions. And we realize that these experiences are to learn from and not to judge ourselves off or judge our abilities. When we're maybe in that ape tendency, we're in an overload and overwhelm, we're in that 8 to 10 bracket, we start to narrow our perspective. We come down just to Grafton Street and we can't see all the other options where there might be pubs and restaurants and other things. In a sports context, we only see the defender in front of us and we can't see a pass left or right of us or another way to score. So we get fixated on the outcome, get fixated maybe on the problem, and we don't see other solutions. So we become either mentally stuck, emotionally stuck, or behaviorally stuck. And this kind of fires then that red hot system, that red brain into overdrive, and we start to activate that stress response rather than that, find and face response, that alert and calm response. So training our responses is when the pressure situation comes up, can I come back out of it, step out of the experience for a moment, take a wide view, slow down rather than rush into it, give myself a bit of context. What are the options here before I make a decision? What's my process around these options? What are the solutions to the outcome I'm looking to generate? And straight away, I'm starting to develop a more flexible perspective rather than a fixed perspective. And I'm beginning to learn already and train a new response to that situation. So we must have an overview and overcome rather than an overload and overwhelm. So we're thinking of wide and slow perspective. We're thinking of solutions and a process, and we're thinking of flexibility. So how do I develop into this process over outcome technique? So, playing an All-Ireland final, it's very easy to get hung up on the outcome of winning or losing. So on a Monday before an All-Ireland final, this is what my process would look like. I'd have a task overview. So the outcome this week I want is to play well and perform in an All-Ireland final. What would be the 4 or 5 key areas I need to focus on this week? Every single day I have roughly 16 to 17 hours to prepare. 18 hours of that, or 8 hours of that, will be recorded in sleep. I have 9 hours there to play with. Work might take up some of that. So that's part of my priorities every day. That's another 8 hours gone. I may have an hour and a half in the evening to practice something that will help generate confidence in the evening. Maybe in a work context, if I'm preparing to present to the team, could I work on my presentation for an hour and a half? What's my process around my performance? So as an athlete, it was good on aerial ball, good on distribution, good on tackling. They were some of the key skills I need to work on and bring into part of my week and my preparation. My ability to support teammates on and off the ball. And they were 4 or 5 pillars that I worked on, mentally rehearsed, physically rehearsed, technically and tactically rehearsed. And then my performance on the Sunday took up 1.5 hours. And then the outcome. So when I didn't have a process, the outcome could roll around in my mind for, 2, 3, 4 weeks after it. Because I didn't, I suppose, review and look at it and detach from it and refine my process, which could take 1.5 hours. So over the next week, if you have something really important, it's about having an overview. What's the outcome I want from it? What's the 4 or 5 main areas that will generate that outcome? How can I prepare on a daily basis? What's my key tasks around my energy? So my sleep, my nutrition, my movement, my hydration. What is the deliberate practice I can do around that for an hour and a half every day? What's the process around my performance? And how do I measure that and prepare and practice for it during the week? And, how do I kind of review my performance and preview my next performance and refine it for the next one after that? So, we can put a lot of emphasis on winning and losing, but as you can see from this chart, there's probably 99% of the other things that are far more important that I can control and influence and put my time into. And for me, after a success or failure, it's giving yourselves 24 hours to mentally and emotionally process that before you go into refine and review. You allow the, I suppose, ecstasy of winning to dissolve, enjoy that experience, share it with family and friends, work colleagues. You've worked hard to achieve it, so why not celebrate and enjoy it? And what's the point of doing something if you don't do that? You know, after something you prepared really well for and it doesn't come off, there's obviously going to be some agony around that. And you've got to leave maybe 24 hours for yourself just to digest that, allow that disappointment and frustration to, be there and sit with it and accept that it's there. And then part of your, review will be saying what went well within that experience over the last 7 days. What could I improve around my preparation, my practice, my process, and my performance to generate the outcome I want in the next performance situation? And it's about refining the areas then I need to improve on and highlighting that. So I want you to think of maybe a current challenge that you'll have over the next week or 10 days. So think of that task that's coming up and having an overview of it. What is it that you're going to face? And just look at it from, if that task was completed, what outcome do you want? What would it look like, feel like, sound like to have achieved that outcome? And just imagine yourself completing that outcome and completing that task. And what would it feel like to have generated that? Don't worry about the detail along the way. Just imagine that feeling and allow that to sink in. So what does success look like on that task for you? And how do you want to operate around that success? What would it look, feel, and sound like to close observers? And then once you've identified that intention or that outcome that you want, what are the 5 main areas to achieve this outcome? And how can I practice them on a daily basis? So if research or communication is part of your 5 main areas, how am I doing in relation to that and my next performance situation? Out of 10 currently. If in a sports context, it's around particular skills around catching, tackling, my role and responsibility on the team, what are the 5 main areas that I need to execute and how am I doing on them currently? In my role and work, what's the expectation on me at the moment? And what are my 5 main areas I can rate success of? And what is the current reality around those 5 main areas? What is working well and what isn't? And then we're just looking for a gap in our performance. And what could be some key actions I can use to close that gap between, my current level and what my outcome is and what I want to generate. So be very specific around, that gap and the action that you're going to include or the habit you're going to include, the behavior you're going to include over the next week or 10 days to close that gap. So I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to complete that framework. And it'll be something you can bring in and use in any context, both in your personal, professional, or sporting pursuits. Just give you another 30 seconds or so to jot down a few more ideas into that framework. Maybe something you'll be able to revisit. And we'll just flick on to the next piece. So the last section for tonight, guys, is just going to be around the tools to perform. So, Marcus Aurelius quote, I love this, and it kind of ties into, Viktor Frankl and Dr. Albert Ellis around, you have the power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. So we all have that ability to choose a response. We all have that inner power in us to interpret meaning, interpret situations the way we want. And when we start to handle that in an optimistic and realistic way, it changes our response to pressure and stress. And, approaching success, embracing pressure, these are learning moments, these are great moments, these are challenging moments. But we begin to find out a bit more around our character strengths, around the perceived self-limit we put on our own capabilities and our potential. And it's amazing when you start to break through some of those limits that we have, a whole world opens up for you. And, I'm thankful for the opportunities I got in sport to maybe break down some of the perceived limits I had around myself, around, am I good enough, used to come up fairly regular. And, putting yourself in a pressure situation in front of 82,000 is a great way to challenge that ego mind and maybe break through some perceived limits you have. Talking in front of a group, be it 1,000 people or 20 people. At the start, when I started out in this gig, talking in front of 30, 16-year-olds was the most intimidating thing I've ever done in my life. And, after 4 or 5 presentations, I found myself starting to desensitize from that pressure and get more used to it, and realizing that, the preparation I used as an athlete was really helpful around preparing for presentations. And the more prepared and practiced, the more confident I felt going into them, and the better you start to get. So, no one is fixed on their talent or their ability, their intelligence. We've got to work and practice and use these things. So how can I regulate these, I suppose, mental, emotional, and behavioral responses? So before it, the most important thing for me is how we're talking to ourselves. And, what I say to myself has 10 times more power over how I feel, how I act, how I behave. And when we start to cultivate, healthy language and helpful language and positive language with ourselves, we change our experience in the external environment. So phrases like I can, I am, I have, I will are really important around shaping our feelings and behaviors towards the situation. And I'll be diving fairly strongly into this after Christmas around confidence and the importance of self-talk and positive self-talk on our performance in the moment, on our motivation, on our clarity, and on our confidence. The framework I took you through there around goal setting and, having task, practice, performance, and process goals is far more important, and we should have a far more orientation around that than the actual outcome of success or failure or winning or losing. Another really important part of our planning going into performance situations is what if then plans. So if I was having my presentation tonight and I was driving to the venue, a what if scenario might have been, if the car broke down, well, then what would I do? and I start to write out maybe some solutions or some issues around that. What if 5 minutes into the presentation the laptop broke down? What would I do then to make sure I executed the presentation? If someone asked me an awkward question, what would I do then around a particular slide or scenario? So, working with business teams or working with sports teams, I'd often ask senior leaders and management to come up with, 5 to 10 what if scenarios around the business could happen this month. And if it does happen, then we have some sort of mental flexibility and emotional flexibility and behavioral flexibility around our response to that, because we've thought of maybe solutions that could happen around that. And we're able to bring that then to the setting when it happens in the moment. It doesn't surprise us, it's not unpredictable, and it doesn't drive that stress response into, cortisol and that ape behavior. So what if then plans are really important going into any performance situation, is probably identifying 3 to 5 things that have maybe gone wrong for you in the past or could go wrong in the future around this situation and context, and what might be a new response I'd have around that. And I start to write out potential solutions when that comes up. I can't highlight enough the importance of simulation training. So for me, I was lucky in a sports context where, I had, 1.5 hours, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, where I could mark Joe Canning and he would give me a fairly good simulated environment of what marking great players was. David Burke would pose different questions. Cyril Donnan would pose different questions. Damien Hayes would pose different questions. And these were great, I suppose, environments for me to test out my capabilities in an environment that was going to really challenge me and get me ready for Croke Park. In a work context now, how do I prepare for these kind of presentations? There's probably somewhere in the region of 20 to 25 hours going into tonight's presentation, where at the start, I probably had 50 slides coming into tonight. I start to reframe that and bring it down to maybe 25, and then I get to a place where I have 20. I would have presented this presentation maybe 50 times in the last 5 years, but this one is particularly new tonight, and I've only done it twice before and leading into tonight. So I've probably about 3 hours to 5 hours preparation around this exact presentation to get myself ready for tonight. So that's simulated training in a work context. If I'm preparing for staff, preparing for a presentation, how do I maybe simulate that and practice the performance environment? What would it look like? What would that presentation look like? Where would it be? What would the logistics of it be? And I start to maybe visualize and prepare myself for that. So what would that scenario look like? Where would it be? Who would be there? What would the lighting be? Who would be in the room? What would they want to hear? What would they like to listen to? What would the experience I'd share around that? That's all the kind of context I go into around my visualization and my simulated training. And then before it, as well as around meditation. So I can't highlight enough the importance of meditation. When we're looking at our 8 behaviors, become aware of them. Meditation is a great thing to catch those helpful and unhelpful thinking patterns I have around situations. When I'm aware of that thinking, then I can maybe shine a light on it and start to change it. It also helps me to dial down that threat detector, that ape brain, and dilute the energy of it. And I start to have less emotional responses, emotional reactions to stress. Meditation helps us to increase our ability to process information, to retain information, and increases our short-term and long-term memory. And it also, from a physical point of view, lowers our heart rate, lowers our blood pressure, opens up those capillaries that are maybe shortened through stress, and it gives us great ability to be aware and be present in the moment. So meditation is a huge form of practice prior to competition, prior to pressure situations, that you build it in as a routine and a training principle. And then in the moment, so 30 seconds out from an All-Ireland final, 30 seconds out from taking an important free, 30 seconds out from an important presentation, when I start to practice conscious breathing throughout the day at different intervals, I lower my heart rate, I lower my blood pressure, and I come into the present moment. I feel grounded and present. And here I can work off, high performance concepts of being in the present moment, not in the future, not in the past. And that's where real performance happens. Also in, a sports context or a business context, stopping myself getting fixated on the problem and just focused on that problem. I take an overview, and even stepping back from the laptop for 10, 20 seconds, looking out the window and getting an overview and a wide perspective starts to make physical changes in my body. When I'm presenting to people, maybe it's taking a wide view of the room slowly and widely, and my eyes can regulate my emotion. So the All Blacks in a rugby context, they're constantly scanning both broadly and narrowly to give themselves a wide view of the pitch. So the last thing they'll concentrate on a scrum half is maybe the ruck situation and passing the ball. They're constantly scanning for space, for gaps, where the opposition have pulled up or shortened. So in a sports context, the visual is a great thing. That eye scanning is so important. They reckon Messi takes about 10 scans in about 30 seconds on every play to see who's behind him, in front of him, to the side of him. And he's really has made up his mind when he gets the ball of the different scenarios that he can do. So that visual scanning and using our eyes to regulate emotions is really important. Ronaldo, before he takes a free kick, he put his hands on his hips. He practices his deep breathing routine. His shoulders are back, his chest is out, his eyes are clear, his eyes are wide. So physically and mentally and emotionally, he's acting confident, he's feeling confident, and he's in that challenge state that we're all trying to get to, where we're in activating, that impact or act syndrome that we all want to have. And talking to myself and talking to others in that moment, sharing that perception of stress, how I'm feeling, I need help from you here, can you help me on this? That's building our relationship with people, we're connecting with people, and we're producing oxytocin during that. And that's that love hormone. We're able to relate to others, and it's strengthening our heart connection, our love connection, our compassion, our empathy. So that's a really important thing, that we're talking to others when we're under stress and feeling it. And the importance in the moment that I have a target. So, there's the goals and I want to finish this scoring chance. There's my teammate and I want to give them that pass. And I'm just executing that task in the moment. In a business context, in the next 5 minutes, here's the outcome I want. This is my target. I'm going to execute this written paragraph in an email. I'm going to communicate to this person in the office, and I'm very task and target orientated. So that's before it and in the moment processes that we can do around that. So I'm just going to ask people, maybe for a couple of moments here, we're just going to work on a couple of things here I'm talking about. And I want to help people to experience being grounded, being present, by using the anchor of our breath, by using some helpful thinking patterns. And we're going to maybe visualize a challenging scenario that's coming up for us, and maybe generate some outcomes around that, and some behaviors, some thinking patterns, some feeling patterns, and some images we want, and how we're going to redirect our attention when our mind wanders, which is natural 50% of the time. So I'd ask people to, ground their feet on the floor for a few moments, put their hands on their laps and open their palms out, and one palm on top of the other. And I'd like you to start to take a deep breath in through the nose for a count of 4 seconds. Pause and feel a slight tension at the top of the breath for 1 or 2 seconds. And exhale out through the nose or mouth for 4 seconds or 5 seconds. So longer on the exhale. And then rest for 3 or 4 seconds. And repeat that inhale in again for 4 seconds. Good long inhale in through the nose. Pausing again at the top of the breath for 1 or 2 seconds. And exhaling out through the nose or mouth for 4 or 5 seconds. And rest for 3 or 4 seconds. So I want you to repeat that now 3 or 4 more times. And think of that box breath. So you're inhaling for 4, pausing for 4, exhaling for 4, and resting for 4. And just think of that box breathing sequence for 4. In 4, pause for 4, exhale for 4, and rest for 4. And just repeat that now 3 or 4 times. And I want you to just begin now to close your mouth, and we're going to work on nasal breathing. So I want you to become aware of your chest and core area rising and falling as you have a soft gaze maybe on the wall in front of you. So I want you to notice the wall in front of you, in the room in front of you, but also notice your external body and that rise and fall on the inhale and the exhale. And using the visual of the eyes to have a soft gaze, noticing left or right without moving the head, giving yourself a wide and slow view of the room without moving your head. And what we call this is a panoramic view of the room. Aware of our outer body, aware of the room, aware of the laptop maybe in front of us. And it's called optical flow. And I invite you now maybe to shut down the eyes, start to notice the air coming in through the nostril, and count 1. Start to notice the air coming out the nostril, count 2. And as the air comes back in the nostril, count 3. And as the air goes out through the nostril, count 4. And continue that sequence now. And it'll be normal and natural for the mind to wander. When you catch that, come back to your breath and just begin the count again. It is normal and natural for a mind to wander. Catch your awareness when the mind wanders. Bring your attention back to the breath. This is a mental rep for your mind, a mental rep for your brain. We're training our attention to be focused on one breath at a time, one moment at a time. Now I invite you to use your imagination now and go forward in time to the challenge or the performance situation that's coming up for you. And I want you to see yourself as if you're watching yourself on TV or from the audience. See yourself arriving to that venue. Notice your body language. Notice your energy. Notice your eye contact and your communication with others. And begin to notice yourself now executing the task that's in front of you. That's presenting or performing in whatever chosen field you're in. See yourself executing the key actions. Notice your body language and movement. Notice your energy and presence. What are some of the key skills you're executing? Start to fill in the picture of the environment that you're in. Who else is there? What else is in the surroundings? What's the day like? What's the weather like? How many people are there? Feel the breeze in your face. Feel the energy in the room. Feel the energy of your team. Notice you at your optimal level now and performing at your best, at your highest focus, attention, and energy. Confident in what you're doing, what you're saying. Just see yourself now in the last minute of that performance now. Notice how you're moving, communicating, thinking, and feeling. What do you sound like to close observers? And just notice that performance situation finishing now. Feel the relief, the joy. Just feel some of the pats of congratulations and the kind comments from team members, teammates, family members. Notice the important people in your life now and how happy and joyful they are towards you. How genuinely happy they are for you that you've performed really well. And just bring yourself back into the room now and become aware of your feet on the floor. Notice all four corners of your feet and that contact with the floor. Notice your hamstrings and your glutes and your sitting muscles and that contact with the chair. Notice your lower back and your upper back and your shoulders. Begin to notice your hands in your lap. And when you're ready, begin to open your eyes and wiggle out your hands and feet. Just move the eyes around the room gently. Just breathe in now and just check in how you feel for a moment or two. What's the feeling or emotion that you feel in this present moment? Thanks, guys. I hope we haven't fell asleep or we're all alive. So that's just a kind of a mix of, grounding ourselves in the present moment through mindful attention, mindful breathing, using the power of our subconscious mind to create the imagination of the outcome we want to have and some of the behaviors around that. And when we can start to see it in our mind, our subconscious mind starts to generate some of the habits and behaviors and emotions that we need to execute that to a really high level. So what we put into our subconscious mind is the experience database of, we've done this before and I can sense it, I can feel it, I can think it, I can feel the images in my mind. And high performers use this, astronauts use this when they're going to Mars and space. Elite athletes use this before Olympic finals, boxers use it before world professional bouts, rugby players use it before test matches, singers, songwriters all would use visualization, and we all use it in different forms, but it's to have a conscious and deliberate practice around that. And we start to build that database and that experience of a situation. And I was a person who was extremely anxious around playing All Ireland finals and big moments, and particularly in the early stages of my career. And when I started to work on this technique, I found that I got very excited and really look forward to these moments in my career. And I really look forward to putting myself in uncomfortable situations and rehearsing and mentally rehearsing them as well. So, I'd love to stay on maybe for 5 or 10 minutes now if people have any feedback they'd like to offer around what they found beneficial, insights they've learned, and maybe some key questions they have around any of the material that was presented and want to ask me further on it. I'd be happy to field any questions both through the chat box and also if you want to verbally ask me as well. So I've just one in from Ed here. Thanks a million, Ed. Any suggestions as to how you would get a team to adjust their emotional responses to perform better in pressure situations? Yeah, so going into, I'll take it from a sports context for a moment, Ed, right? Take Limerick now in the All-Ireland final, we'll say on Sunday. They would have a very clear plan from an activation point of view from the morning to throw in exactly what level of activation they want to be and what they're doing every hour right up to throw in. So part of that would be, their meal times. Part of that would be making sure players have downtime to relax and stretch and, watch something on TV and have a games room to calm and keep calm. On the bus to the venue, we would have music and video playing to, put people in the best positive emotional state and mental state, and also trigger the subconscious mind with positive imagery and positive memories to make sure that that's the most recent and current thing gone into their mind. So, key things, how you warm up and your habits around that are really important. You're planning out maybe 48 hours before an event, 24 hours before an event, 12 hours before an event, 6 hours before an event, and having something in every hour that you're doing when you're awake and when you're not awake, helps us not to get carried away with, a future-based thought, and we just lock ourselves into process and task hour by hour. And, I think that has really helped me to, going into an All-Ireland final, there's no point using up mental and emotional and physical energy thinking about it. So having a daily plan and a daily process around that is really important in those pre-performance routines. Using simple triggers around your breath work, the visualization, using performance skills like looking at past videos of yourself performing well are really good to help with that emotional response. Actually accepting that I'm going to have some nerves, some anxiety, some panic around this, writing down some of the things that I'm feeling around my performance. And when I write them down, I start to declutter my mind and I start to look at, okay, why am I feeling this way? Because I'm thinking this way and I'm behaving this way. And when I can separate what I'm thinking from what I'm feeling and what I'm behaving, I start to recognize that I can change these thinking patterns I'm having around this performance situation. That changes how I'm feeling and that'll change how I'm behaving. So there are some of the techniques, Ed, you can use around developing your emotional response and performing better in pressure situations.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, so from Ed's question, do you have different techniques for different personalities within a team? Yeah, absolutely. I think, certain people who would be introverted prefer maybe to be left alone and on their own for maybe, the day of an event or the 2 or 3 days leading into an event. Other people might be more extroverted and they have a need to be around teammates and friends and family. So it's about understanding the different personalities in your team and what their need is. Some people may like a quiet chat in a quiet space and just like to be around 1 or 2 people. Others like to be in a group of 8 or 10 people where it gives them energy. Music is a great thing to create different emotions in people. So asking, people in a work context or a sport context to put a playlist together to create the right positive environment and positive emotions in people. Understanding the need of the person in front of you is probably most important, and you'll do that by understanding what triggers them going into matches. So, what triggers you going into performance situations in work, and asking people, how do you feel about this situation? Do you like presenting in front of people? Do you like performing in front of people? How can maybe I can help you? And you're growing that heart connection, that oxytocin by, being vulnerable and saying, I was a person who got very nervous in front of presentations, or I was very nervous playing in Crow Park previously, and this is what helped me. Hi Helen, is there apps or links to certain meditations that you would recommend? I'd be very happy to share them, Helen, with you afterwards. I've created a lot of, I suppose, meditations and visualizations that I've done for people over the years. So I would absolutely share them with people that would like them after the call, and I'll put them on the email or send them on WhatsApp to you. If you have a goal to reach that months away, should I start visualization now, or am I at risk of overdoing it? Would be a positive, or can we do it too much? Yeah, I think so, Niall. I think it's important to have a vision of the future and the outcome you want, and maybe tapping into that once or twice a week, maybe to start to motivate yourself by the feeling of having that outcome, completed. What would it provide for me in that moment? How would I feel? How would I act? How would I behave? What difference would it make to my friends and family and my personal life? And just having that image of that success is a good thing once or twice a week. But within your other visualizations, I think it should be the how to get there. So you're practicing the key skills around that. So, as a Gaelic footballer or hurler, it should be seeing yourself executing your tackling, your passing, your distribution, your support play. In a business context, it should be maybe around your communication, how you lead the team, how you deal with challenges. Uh, how you're curious around certain people and situations. So it's identifying maybe the 4 or 5 key skills that are going to generate that outcome for you, and starting to rehearse and mentally rehearse yourself each day, developing those skills and getting better at them, and also being intentional around how you reflect on them and what you're doing well now, and maybe what's the gap every day and how you can improve on that tomorrow.
That's perfect. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Niall.
Tony Og, I have another question there. If you were working with, say, teenagers, 17, 18-year-olds, what would be maybe some of the simple concepts that you talk about tonight that might be appropriate for a group like that to introduce them to?
Definitely starting with goal setting, Ed, and just breaking it down that, winning or losing in the sports context is the last thing that's going to happen. What's our best performance? What does that look like? What are some of the pillars we could measure around that? So, kickouts or puckouts, tackles, scoring, not conceding, different things like that. Get players to come up with, 5 key pillars around performance. And then we make sure we have a measurement around that, be it stats or looking back at the video to see what we did well or didn't do well. And we're giving players responsibility then around the roles. How do you as a halfback influence these stats? What's your key role or your key performance indicators around that? And, are they things that are in your control and you can influence, or are they things outside you? So, getting players from an individual level then to recognize how their role contributes to these team goals. And, that's definitely one element we can do around it, is goal setting. The other thing is then, when we're getting maybe into that redhead zone, what's the things we can do as a team to help with that? So how do we communicate to ourselves from a positive and helpful point of view? How does Ed communicate to Tony when he makes a mistake? How does he communicate to him when he does something well? What might be the difference there? How do I calm myself after I make a mistake? What's my simple reset routine? So how can I adjust my body language like Ronaldo? How can I breathe like Johnny Cooper to reset and regulate my stress response? So they're all little things. How do we reset when the ball goes dead? What does getting back into position look like? What does it look like from a mental and emotional point of view? So goal setting, I think, body language, communication, breath work, I think are all simple little things we can build into training and into matches to, build the skill set of players to deal with the present moment and be more present in it.
Excellent. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Ed. Any other questions, guys? Okay, thanks a million for coming on tonight, guys. And I really appreciate most of you have been here for the three-part series. With a lot of people were caught with work projects this evening and everything, so the numbers are a bit lower. But I really, really thank you from the bottom of my heart for showing up the last 3 Monday nights. If there's anything over the last 3 weeks that maybe have more time for reflection over Christmas comes up for you and you want to ask, don't hesitate to send me an email. I'll be sharing a kind of this workshop and some key tools after it as well. And if anyone would like some meditations to sample and try, I'd be happy to share them with you. And not forgetting, we'll have 3 workshops after Christmas as well on, generating confidence, detaching from performance and making sure that we know how to manage our mental, emotional, spiritual and physical energy. So there'll be a good follow on to what we've covered in these 3 sections. And I think, by the end of it, you should have a really strong skill set. And, I wish you all a really peaceful and healthy and happy Christmas period in December. And thanks so much from the bottom of my heart for showing up the last couple of weeks as well.
Thank you, Tony. Same to you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Tony. Take care.
Thanks, Terence.
Thanks.